Also have this on your screen, a post from U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. Take a look. It says the Department of Justice is suing New York City and Mayor Eric Adams for continuing to obstruct law enforcement with sanctuary city policies. If New York's leaders won't step up to protect their citizens, we will. Now, the Attorney General making some brief comments earlier this week regarding the situation. Let's take a listen.
New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today. They have green light laws, meaning they're giving a green light to any illegal alien in New York where law enforcement officers cannot check their identity if they pull them over.
So that was Attorney General Pam Bondi earlier this week discussing that entire situation. Joining us now to talk about this even further is a Fox 5 New York reporter, Lisa Evers. Lisa, what are we hearing in regards to the reaction coming from New York City leaders?
Well, you want to talk about a hot potato that dropped in his lap. This is what exactly has happened to Mayor Adams. He's being sued. The city council is being sued. Other departments are being sued for the sanctuary city laws, which basically the Attorney General obviously is correct in what she's saying. These sanctuary city laws allow anybody to be in New York City, regardless of where they came from, regardless of what they did before they came from, regardless of what they're doing once they're actually here, and not have to turn over any information to the federal authorities. And I think that you'll hear, we've seen people protesting ICE raids, that type of thing. People are not protesting the ICE arrests of these undocumented individuals who have committed crimes over and over again, as we saw with the shooting of the Customs and Border Protection officer just about a week and a half ago. That what's happening is these sanctuary city laws allowed for the migrant abuse that took place in New York City. And you have to understand, I'll give you context from the New York City residents' point of view. You had Mayor Adams in 2022 when the first buses started arriving from Texas and Arizona into the Port Authority in New York City. They're getting off. He was there to greet them. Welcome to New York, not knowing who was who. People were giving names. There was no checking for any kind of documentation of any type of ID or proof of who they actually were, saying, come to New York, welcome to New York, we're going to take care of you. And then we systematically saw over the next several years, various communities being decimated by this influx of hundreds of thousands a week that were coming in. And yes, some were were looking to start a new life. They crossed the border illegally, but they were maybe they were called asylum seekers, but there was no proof that they had actually filed any type of paperwork or made any kind of application. So what happened was the criminality that came along with it was staggering. We heard the current border czar, Tom Homan, he said a couple of years ago to the NYPD and to the mayor, we had him here on Fox 5 in New York, saying, listen, if you arrest any undocumented migrants that are committing crimes, you don't even have to bother processing them. You don't have to clog up your court system. You don't have to use taxpayer money to house them and feed them and have them go through this revolving door of criminal justice, which New York State has become under bail reform laws from several years ago. You just give them over to us, call ICE, and we'll take them off your hands. And the answer from the city was flat out no. So what Mayor Adams is trying to do right now, it appears, is a position that he's maintained for many months. It's been very difficult for people to understand. He says, we will abide by federal law. However, we are not going to aid in the deportation proceedings against undocumented migrants. Now, at other times, he said if they commit a crime, he goes, of course, we will comply. But then, so it's not a clear policy. It's something that is confusing to a lot of New Yorkers. And I have to tell you, there's a lot of New Yorkers, the population in the city over the last 5 years has gone down. The only reason it hasn't gone down so precipitously is because of these hundreds of thousands of undocumented migrants coming into the city, and many of them staying here. And this is a very very, very sore topic with a lot of New York City residents in working class and middle class neighborhoods in the city, and especially in the low income, struggling neighborhoods where people saw the migrants. They got off the bus. Here's your package of benefits, a package of benefits. They had hotels. They didn't like, some of them didn't want to stay in the shelters because they didn't like the food. They didn't like the fact they had to eat in a cafeteria and didn't have food delivered to their room, or weren't able to have food in their room. They were given gifts, they were given prepaid cards, debit cards prepaid that they could use for necessities. They took over hotels. They shut down hotels. Tourist hotels that had previously been tourist hotels had now been gone, had turned into these money makers for some of the hotel owners because they were getting so much money from the city to house these migrants in hotels. You look at the famous Roosevelt Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. We also saw what happened in the neighborhoods. This was the other story that we did a number of times, but it was very, a lot of times got overlooked, was the impact on the residential communities. They built a migrant shelter on Randall's Island, which is an island in between Manhattan and Queens in the East River. It's accessible by bridges and footbridges. It happened to be the one area, the park area there, where kids from 3 schools in Harlem could actually have sports and actually have physical education. And those parks were taken over by the undocumented migrants who were in that shelter. We were there, Janae. You wouldn't even believe it. We were there after there was a shooting. There was a shooting. There was gun running. Police told us coming out of that shelter. They were ditching the mopeds that they were using to rob people from purses, women from women's chains, men's chains, purses, which were these robberies that were going on for quite a while. And then they just ditched the scooters in the woods nearby. They stashed guns around. They brought guns into the shelter itself. It was so brazen that they actually stole cars and parked the stolen cars in front of the shelter. And then when that became publicized, the NYPD went in there and confiscated as many stolen cars and stolen mopeds and e-bikes as they possibly could. But of course, a week or two later, there were more because they went out and they stole even more. And then you want to talk about the violent crime, the shootings, the stabbings, these types of things. New Yorkers have just really had enough. And it's mind-boggling that when you have a state like New York, where because of bail reform, there's so many crimes that are, that do not require bail at all. People are just told to come back, commit a rape, do these other things, and come back to court or whatever, and they go out and they do it again. And one thing I've learned from covering the NYPD, they tell me almost every time that we're doing one of these stories, this person is a repeat offender, a career criminal. He has done this before. He will do it again, as we saw with the case, the shooting, the robbery on the Customs and Border Protection officer, which thank God he survived. It could have been so much worse, but this is what they're seeing. So a lot of people are saying the Justice Department is saying they'll protect New Yorkers. That is great, but for politically, this is a really difficult moment, especially for Mayor Adams, because he's tried to be the mayor for law and order, the mayor for safety and justice on the one hand, and then the migrant's best friend on the other, and he's walking a real tightrope because his whole handling of the migrant crisis, and let's call it what it is a crisis and was a crisis here in New York City, is just one of those very, very sore points with a lot of longtime Democratic voters and his longtime supporters in the communities.
All right, Fox 5's Lisa Evers there. We always appreciate you coming on to really break down this entire topic there. Again, the Department of Justice suing in New York City, some of the officials there over these sanctuary city policies. Now, there is so much to discuss within this topic, but unfortunately, we do have to end it here. But we will be checking in with you, of course, to see how this develops going forward. Thank you, Lisa.
All right, thank you very much.